how do you make sure that you start 0 to 1 and solve before scale, right? And now I'm here at Microsoft at the intersection of AI and work.
Welcome to Seed to Scale's Decoding AI, where we deep dive with the builders shaping the future of artificial intelligence. I'm Anand Daniel, partner at Axel, and today I'm joined by one of the most influential product leaders at the intersection of AI and work, Aparna Chennapragada. Aparna is the Chief Product Officer of Microsoft Experiences and Devices Division, leading efforts to transform the world of work with AI. She has 25 plus years of experience as a senior executive, founder, and product leader, successfully leading companies and teams through massive platform shifts, from the internet to mobile to AI at Microsoft, Google, Robinhood, and Akamai, all the amazing companies. Aparna is also the founder of Google Lens, an AI product with billions of monthly searches, which started much before the current AI wave. She serves on the board of eBay and was previously on the board of Capital One. She was recently selected as one of the Fortune's most powerful rising executives of America. In this episode, we break down what it takes to run cutting-edge AI into daily habit, the real product lessons from building tools that people don't just try, but trust. If you're building AI-native products, this one's packed with insight. Thank you, Aparna, for joining us. We've come a long way from Boston, right? So, sitting in the valley right now. Maybe for those, the audience who doesn't know you, just walk us through your story, right?
It's good to catch up, Anand. I think, exactly. The snowy winters in Boston, almost like 15 years ago, I think. You know, I think when I look back at kind of the journey, I think of almost like 3 chapters. The first chapter was actually before on the East Coast when I first was this bright-eyed, bushy-tailed engineer at Akamai, which is an MIT spin-off. That was my first brush with how do you live in the future and build something that doesn't exist. That was the first wave, right? The internet and 1.0 and all the .com and just the infrastructure for content delivery. Then the second chapter was I spent a lot of years at Google where I joke saying I worked on AI before it was cool. So of course I cut my teeth in Google search, which is a great training ground for how do you build data-driven information products that still maintain that intuitive interface, right? At the end of the day, it's a search box and anyone should be able to use it and you can impact billions of people. So that was a big learning phase for me. And then I'd say the third chapter was saying, okay, how do you start to then build AI products? So I built a couple of them at Google. One was Google Assistant, one turned into Google Assistant, was a product called Google Now. That was the lesson in being early. It was pre-LLMs, pre-deep learning, pre-any of the big step functions.
Which year was this?
That was 2015, 2014. Wow. And so the interface was amazing. We'd even won the Popular Science Innovation of the Year. But the intelligence wasn't there, right? Then I learned my lesson to say, hey, look, you need to have the timing of the tech. The tech needs to meet the moment of consumer behavior. So I founded this product area called Google Lens. So the idea is that you should be able to search what you see. That, again, went from zero, literally me and a few engineers to billions of searches per month now.
I'm one of those.
Thank you. And that taught us so many lessons in both in terms of AI forward development, not necessarily LLMs, but the deep learning version of it. But also just how do you make sure that you start 0 to 1 and solve before scale, right? And now I'm here at Microsoft at the intersection of AI and work.
How is Gen AI different? What's real? And what could be not?
I joke saying, in AI, yesterday's magic is today's commodity. It just feels like the tech shifts and the tech step functions are compressed from decades to months. Or weeks even. Even as we speak, I'm sure there's some model being dropped somewhere, right? So for me, it's the fact that there was a time for change management in companies, for consumers to adapt to new behaviors, and that spanned over decades, right? From if you think about dial-up modem to DSL to high-speed internet or mobile even. Right? This one feels like the fastest rate of change, both on the technology side, the models and the intelligence side. You see all those graphs, right? And on the consumer adoption side, I mean, ChatGPT is the fastest growing. I think in history, it's kind of hit the 100 million users in the fastest time, etc. So that's one.
Okay.
I think that on the flip side, though, I do think there's a lot of shooting in the dark that's happening, which is, if you look at the number of agents that are trying to do these narrow specific things, and we'll talk about that more, because I do think that a lot of these ideas and companies are going to get eaten by the model.
You focus on the workplace side. Like talk through what excites you about AI in the workplace. Like maybe just walk us through that.
And I'll tell you like the things that at least I'm really excited about within Microsoft. One is, if you look at the past shifts, it's been with the PC, of course, we've had like, Excel and Word and PowerPoint, these things that have like meaningfully impacted individuals, right? It's an individual productivity play. And that's changed the game, right? Then when the cloud and mobile happened, I think that it's been more of a connectivity and team, right? If you think about email and if you think about teams, it's collaboration. That's so at a team level. So from an individual person to teams. I think with AI, I see a shift at the organization level, right? The entire company can be rethought, and both on the efficiency side as well as kind of like the revenue side. I'll give you one small example. The way we have these agents that we've been building at Microsoft. One of them is called Researcher. And what our clients and customers have been using it for is, if they have a prospective customer meeting, they just rely on this researcher and say, hey, if I am meeting with this customer, scour the entire web, but also the entire set of like emails, meetings, past meetings, past stuff. Even if I, as a sales rep, haven't been like the past guys have done it, and come back with the best brief so that I can close this deal. Now that is, if you think about it, that is not just, hey, X%, like I've just saved you time by summarizing a document. It's just, you've given me superpowers that don't exist before. So I think that's the kind of like almost step function productivity at the organizational level that I'm very excited about. I feel like anytime there's a big technology shift, we typically say, oh, just add AI. The first set of ideas were all just add AI.
Yeah.
Now, if you think about it, that's no different from back in the day where, the first websites were scanned brochures, right? Because that's what we were used to. The previous analog just stretches.
Yeah.
Or the first mobile apps were just desktop website shrunk down to the form factor. So I think the first wave within Microsoft and across the board has been, hey, you have these amazing products that people use day in and day out. What happens if you have like chat and AI to them? So we launched with Copilot, we said, if you're in a meeting, can you do a recap of the meeting? Can you summarize the action items? And so that you have like this boost. Same thing with a Word document and so on. Now that's been useful, but that I'd say is only the first phase. Now we're entering what I'd say is like, AI first. So from this smart feature, just add AI, to like, what is the rethink AI first? And there a couple of things are really exciting, where these agents that are almost these virtual teammates, if you will, that any employee today, just like they get these software products, so you get an email, you get like a Word documents and so on, authoring tools, etc. Can you also get these like virtual set of agents, right? One for data analysis, one for research, maybe another for project management. As we have these agents, what we are starting to see is that that's very AI first, right? So that's looking at the entire workflow. And if you have a sales rep and you're giving them a sales agent, it's not just about saying, oh, you're using the current enterprise sales productivity software and you sprinkle some AI on it. It's like really looking at the whole workflow and being able to like chat with the agent to do a lot more than you usually use software tools for. It's a work in progress, I would say. Even within Microsoft, we're seeing that, for example, part of it is the user behavior itself. We're so used to our existing workflows. So even when AI can do something significantly better, the adoption rate will depend on how much you can lean into the capabilities.
Are you seeing any user behavior shifts that show you that, okay, this is being truly useful?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of like what I call like sound of clicks, right? So one sound of click is in this, meetings and collaboration. So anecdotally and from our customers, previously most meetings weren't recorded, right? Because, and then a transcription. But now I have seen people say, "Oh, I don't need to go to that meeting." Right, because the meeting recording is there. So there used to be this FOMO, and that's the classic thing in companies where you're like, if you're not there, you miss out on the context, and you're kind of this meeting tourism that happens, right? So this is actually one of the things that we're very clearly seeing, people actually relying on the AI recording and transcription. The other one that we're seeing a lot is where folks want to actually look at content over time, right? So for example, like, if there's a share in Microsoft world, if there's a SharePoint site with all of the information, it's like, you have tons and tons of like financial documents. No single person can probably look at all of that. So instinctively, folks are using Copilot and folks are using the agents and saying, can you summarize this, or can you look for this particular needle in the haystack? That is another one where you're almost extending your memory and your processing power using AI. All the previous wiring and processes and structures and playbooks, a lot of them will have to be revisited. So I'll give you one example. When we built these, like a couple of these agents, right, in the recent past, we actually started with like prompt sets. We didn't kind of start with, these long, in the previous world, you write the PRD and like, as a product manager, you'd say like, you write the spec, you get the stakeholders, you get all of these things. You still have to do some of that. But when you're trying to build it model first, you start with the prompts that you want to be worked. So I've often said prompt sets are the new PRDs, and that's bearing out. So that's number one. I think the second one that we are observing is that the cycle time, right? So because you start to see the models are getting advanced over months, you can't kind of think of a product that, say, ships in like a year.
Yeah.
Because by that time, the world has changed, right? It's much better for us to get out there, iterate, and kind of like see where the gaps are and tweak and so on, right? So that cycle time is another one where it does mean like then intense short sprints versus like kind of this longer run. So if you think about waterfall and agile, this is like even more continuous, right? So that's the second. The third one is, this is at least in PMs, we are really trying to inculcate that in Microsoft, which is how do you have a sense of how to evaluate results. So in some sense, in the past, when you said, hey, does the product work or not, you talk to customers, you still have to do that. You look at kind of the results of how people are using A/B testing in the web scale world. Now, I think one of the key things is skills to evaluate the models and evaluate the product that is built on the model. So which means you have your set of prompts or set of scenarios, and you need to be able to have a continuous pipeline of evaluation. And you need to have evaluations legibility. Like you actually have to be able to like understand evals. And previously in some pockets of pre-AI world, like if you worked on search or if you worked on newsfeed in Facebook, you had those skills, but not as a general purpose product management skills. So, but today I would say eval is one of the core legs in the stool as a product manager.
So people have to develop that.
Develop that nose for it, develop that. And it's a muscle group and you have to kind of get into it. The flip side to it, I think, because it's so easy to prototype things and it's so easy to kind of express your ideas, I do think having judgment becomes way more important too, right? So for example, like previously I would say the bottleneck was engineering, and the bottleneck was like, how do you actually like, prototype, you have to scrounge around, find that engineer who can kind of like, work with you. Now, if you can prototype with these no-code tools, like we just launched that with GitHub as well, like the Spark tool, you can actually, as a product person, express that as a prototype. So now the bottleneck becomes, how do you have the judgment to say which idea should you pursue, right? There's an abundance of all of these ideas now.
So how does one figure that out? Because you can now launch so many things. You can launch 3 things in parallel. Like any frameworks, or like how should someone first in a big company, and then we can also think the same thing applies now, as you said, startup and like everyone's in a level.
I do think it levels the field in the sense that the muscle groups that we all have to develop are the same. I talk to a bunch of the startups. I see the same thing in Microsoft. It's even more important in this world to know whether you are going to be whether you're going to have a durable value or not, right? Because as these general purpose models, can do anything, a chat interface to a general purpose model. So that's the number one question I ask for product folks to say, hey, I have an idea. First question I say is, hey, is this something that a general purpose model, foundational model with a chat interface, can that answer this, right? So if you're building something that is I am going to answer questions about this specific narrow subdomain, the general purpose model can answer that question. So that's number one. Is it going to be durable? I think the second one is, do you have any proprietary data or domain specific expertise or process knowledge that can then be part of that model? So if you are, for example, building a very tailored specialized agent for auditors or for financial analysts, and you have like proprietary data that can either be used to express the features or to even post-train the model, right? So that's another advantage here. And I would say, I think the third one, which there is a difference between startups and large companies, is distribution, right? If you already have customers who are asking for those things, then you should be able to like do a better job of like serving those customers. And there's a different playbook for startups in terms of like, how do you get that, the third D?
Yeah, the distribution side. Maybe this is a good time to segue into how do you evaluate, is this something that 3 months from now the model is going to do with a chat interface, like how you talked about?
Right. Look, first I will give a giant preface, which is, I think anyone who has this like perfect precision and certainty on this is probably wrong, right? Because I do think that this is one where there's so many confounding variables, all the way from chips to geopolitics to like open source versus closed source to the app versus the model, and then again like distribution and access to users. So lots of variables being tweaked, and in fact, one example I would say is what's happening in the coding tools, right? We started out with, a co-pilot kind of an approach where you say, hey, you assist the programmer. Then we went to if you look at Cursor, it's a full-blown IDE. It's an app, more app first. But then now if you look at Claude Code, it's model first. And so this whole model first to app first, I do think that there will be a back and forth on this. What I mean by the model eats X is, every few months, the models are getting significantly better in many dimensions, that if you build and if you are making investments in your product that bet against the model getting better, you need to pause. And we actually, I'll give you a personal example. When I joined Microsoft, we were building this product called Designer. And the idea was to say, hey, if you can give a prompt, and you can generate an image or a poster or a slide, etc. Right? Now the models were not that great. So if you just built something that's a wraparound model, in fact the team did, it turned out it was like a slot machine, right? One time it would be great, another time it had 6 fingers on a person, like. And then you say, oh, let's go solve the 6-finger problem. And if you spend 1 year solving these, what I think of as the metaphorical 6-finger problems, 1 year later, GPT-4o comes, it has solved most of these problems, right? There's a next harder set of things that it may not have solved, character consistency between images and so on. But that's a great example of like, if you invested solely on like fixating on those things, it's a waste of investment there. So the model ate all of that product work, that's one flavor of it, where watch out for investments where you are implicitly betting against the model getting better. The other one I think of it is model eats. So first one, what I said is the model eating engineering, right? Second one is the model eating the product itself. So here's an example where I saw a bunch of startups and even internal ideas talk about, we are going to work on this specific narrow agent that does homework help, or that does therapy, or that does like specific things. Turns out 1 year later, the general purpose models are way better than any individual product, right, that you've built in this space. So that's an example of the model eating the product itself. Right, where you've built this entire like custom thing, but actually that custom thing is an example, is just one feature of the broader foundational model. Now, that particular thing is not that different from like back in the day when search, for example, you could say, oh, I have like the search engine for very, very specific things. And then, of course, when the overall search engine ranking and quality becomes better, then, that gets subsumed. But this is a flavor. The third one that I'm starting to see happen is the model eating the UI, right? So this one is really hard for me to process and kind of like think about what's the implication, because huge implications of this. So today, for example, a lot of the value in the GUI and the scaffolding that many of our Microsoft products or even any consumer products, enterprise products, is because the user is sitting in front of these things. These are static pixels that have been drawn over years, and you have these menus, you have this muscle memory, and so on. What happens if you can actually just chat and get your work done, and you don't even need to know where the menus are? Two, it can draw the menu for you, right? The generative UI breakthroughs that are happening with the model. That's where I think the whole what is the interface between the user and the model changes. And so that's an area where, again, we have like thousands of man years across the software industry, if not more, invested in these UIs. And what happens if the model eats the UI? Not if, when.
Yeah, it's a when. So like maybe let's talk more about that. The user interface itself, how is it going to change?
Oh yeah, I have thoughts. I think I mean parts of these thoughts are kind of like almost predictions, and parts of them are things is a wish list, or I want to will that to happen. I would say, look, the first statement I'll make is chat is much more durable and like a robust interface than a lot of people think. If you look at it, chat is a fantastic communication interface between people. I mean, WhatsApp is a great evidence of it, the billion people proof of it. And there's no reason why that would change. So as a communication interface, I think it's going to remain. Meaning, if I want to tell my AI product what to do, I will use chat because it's very, very efficient to do that. But I make a distinction between what is a good communication interface and what's a good productivity interface. So if you and I are working together, if all we could do was just chat with each other, that would be very limiting, right? I would want to point something to you. You would want to kind of say, hey, like draw a screen together, whiteboard together, like visualize things together, edit a document together, and so on. So those, to me, that's the DOS to GUI transition that is inevitable, right? Because that's such a much more high bandwidth way of interacting and collaborating. So communication wise, if I want to just quickly mention to you that, hey, that thing that you asked me to do, I got it done. Great. That's why, so I do think that human to agent communication interface, chat's great. Human to agent or human to AI productivity interface has got to be much richer than that. And that's where I think within Microsoft, for example, one of the things we're looking at, taking that example of image editing, we said, what does an AI first editor look like, right? It won't just look like chat. You will want to kind of say, oh yeah, I want to take this stuff out. I want to point to this thing and say, change this from a girl to a boy in this poster, versus like expelling that out. There'll be a lot more of these things. And the good thing here is that the models themselves are, the multimodal aspect is getting better. So they are able to actually understand images, understand videos, generate videos, generate images, a lot more.
Audio, everything.
Audio, all of that. And to me, I think, I mean, if I look back at my past, that was one of the beliefs where I started with Assistant and Lens, which is voice and vision are, I mean, our 30% of our cortex is like dedicated to processing vision. So it's like that's a powerful signal.
Because models are growing so fast. Like, where is it that people can go deep and build value that can last?
It's easier to see what you should avoid.
Yeah.
Right? But what are the things that kind of, what are the prescriptive things?
Yeah.
There's a few patterns that I'm seeing. One is, as you said, data, right? I think it is one of those cases where a few different flavors. Data from the, hey, how do you understand the domain and the business problem enough, right? To be able to construct a workflow around the model. So if you just are wrapping the model and doing an information display, not going to make it. I think it's much more important to say, are you doing read writes, for example? Let's say you're saying, take an example like you're building the expense report agent, right? Now, if you just take the, hey, what can the model do? But then wrap it in this very deterministic workflow and give reliability on top of it. So I think that's number one. So a lot of these models are getting to a point where the 95% autonomy is is feasible, but the last 5% will be very hard, right? No different from if you look at Waymo self-driving, the 95% to full autonomy took like 15 years, right? So I think one thing I'd say is, how can you build software scaffolding with data around the 95% autonomy to make it to the 100%? So then you build a reliable deterministic wrapper around and a workflow based one around the model. So that's one angle for startups, I would say. The second angle is the data itself, meaning where are you able to collect or harness proprietary data. Now that data can be like data within the enterprise that you have access to, but as a startup, there's a bootstrap problem, right? You don't have data day one. But I think it's really important to then think about what are ways that you design the product to be able to collect that data, right? So if you are, for example, building this AI, let's say this expense report agent, how are you able to instrument the agent and the interface so that you know when certain things that the model is doing are much more useful to the user, but certain things are not. And that feedback loop goes back into your own post-training of the model. So that is, I think, the data itself is not just about, hey, do you have access to data? Are you able to create data, right? That becomes a moat. Then there's a third one, which I think applies a lot more to long-running products, which is, I think of memory as a moat, right? So it's a particular flavor of data, I would say, which is what are the ways that if a customer is with you over time, is there a compounding value to using the product, right? Because I see that even between like models where you say, even if by benchmarks, everything is on par, if I've had history with a certain chat product, then it's harder for me to say, oh yeah, I'll up and move to something else. So the switching costs become much higher. So memory is on the consumer side, it's easy to think about. Yeah, any AI product that knows me a lot more, it's a better product.
So most of the startups are working with models they don't control.
Model first doesn't mean model only, right? So I do think you'll have to rethink some of the engineering around put the model at the center of it. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you have DevOps that you're doing around the model. You do want to say, like, what are ways that you can get a lot more, for example, natural language interface to DevOps. So it is a question of, for me, building the right engineering scaffolding to take from the 95% to 100% reliability. So like you inherently have a stochastic model, and how do you put a reliability wrapper around it? But I think the corollary to that is the engineering that needs to be done. So for example, today, like if these models have limitations, context windows are such that you can't actually have entire large sets of data in the context window. So how do you actually have engineering around to be able to use these tools? Like how do you use RAG? How do you use like system prompts? These 3 or 4 tools that are surrounding the model, that's engineering that the company should be, and the product team should be looking at. In fact, there's an excellent post that I just read from the Manus team on context engineering, right? I think this is the term that Andre Karpati said, is that, it's not so much prompt engineering. You need to think about context engineering. So you have the model, and you have this layer of infrastructure, logic, and so on. He calls it the context engineering. And there's like real engineering to be done around saying, how do you make sure, when do you cache some of this context into the context window for the model? When do you actually use RAG? How do you make sure that you are not, if the application requires less hallucination, like how do you kind of tune these things? And then there's the interface layer itself, which you touched on a few minutes ago. Interface layer is another one where I do think there's innovation to be had, and startups can do a lot here. Particularly, I think, because it is really hard for large companies or established products who have established existing customers with certain muscle memory
To go change.
and say move their cheese. So I think that's a really good opportunity for a startup to say, look, if you just started from scratch and today you reimagine how you would, build video editing, how would you do image editing, how would you do like productivity, how did you do authoring, right? I think that's a clean slate.
How does the team change? Like who do you hire? Like how do you put this all together?
I do see that there's like a little bit of this double barbell thing that's happening in the talent shape. So what I mean by that is, I think simultaneously there's a huge premium for folks who are what I would call model whisperers, right? Like, I mean, you saw the Facebook thing, researchers who are very, very trained on very focused on this wave of AI, right? So that's like the hyper specialization, I would say. And the other extreme of that double barbell is a lot of functions previously that were like siloed and these were the swim lanes are all getting blurred, right? I mean, today, for example, even within Microsoft, I see product people building using no-code tools. I see engineers who are just effectively like, product people because they're interacting with the models and saying, I want these prompts to work better. And at the end of the day, that is the product, right? And so the lines are blurred there. The lines are blurred even with the business process function. So previously, again, like support was one, I think the sales was one, service was another. And now if you have tools that can go in between, the customer journey is the same. Like, so how do you actually, you don't want to hire folks who are very, very specialized to these business process functions because the business process itself is getting blurred. If you look at the team size, so there's a team composition, there's the team operation, and there's a team size. Composition we just talked about. The operation, the cycles are over like days and weeks. So I think how they communicate, how we actually iterate on things is much more compressed because you're not again like building to a 1-year product. And the product is an interaction between the product and the user. So the more you can actually get out there, it's a continuous process. And then the size. In most cases, when you're trying to get like the direct line to the user and have a rapid iteration, it's a disadvantage to have large teams because what you kind of get maybe with some scale, you lose in agility, you lose in direct contact with the product and with the model itself. So that's again another advantage, I'd say. So I do think that even within big companies, you'll have lots of pods of small teams. If you're actually not building with AI, you're doing it wrong, right? I think that is a necessary condition. With AI, the expertise is in everybody's pocket. So it's no longer that scarce asset. So I think then you say, okay, what are the things that are scarce? And one thing that's still scarce is, I think, ambition and agency, right? So like it's harder to test for because anyone can state that they're high ambition and they get stuff done. But I think even in how people use the tools. So some of the times I'm looking at folks and saying, you can expect more out of the products. Right? The AI products can do a lot more than what you're asking them to do. And we're still not, that's another test where you say, have high expectations of the AI models.
From a consumer or a customer understanding use case perspective, do you see anything different? Now, we've talked about the whole building process from PRD all the way through, right? So any thoughts on that?
In some ways, the customer understanding becomes even more important. So I actually think in terms of that, back to the team composition, there's the double barbell super specializers, and then very few of them. And then you have the generalists. And I think actually the two other folks at the table need to be business experience folks, because in fact in the past there was this shift towards even PM in software industry being a lot more, do you have a CS background, do you have like tech background? I actually think there'll be a swing to like core business folks, because that's a unique value that's needed to build the product. That's one new constituent at the table. I think the other constituent, and this is one where it is potentially spicy, I think it's important. We've had debates with other folks. I think actually someone with a psychology and a neuroscience and a behavioral lens will be important, because you do have, these things are not humans, right? Like, to be clear, these are all tools. The AI models are tools. but they have been trained on humans. So it's, I think of the next wave, like, we talk about it as hardware and software. This is like neuralware, right? It's a different kind of software, which does require human understanding, because there are things that work on these agents that wouldn't work on, say, like if you had a Word or a PowerPoint, you say, try harder. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
But in some of these cases, it does.
So these behavioral analysts will go and talk to the customers and understand things and then translate that.
I think it need not be the same set of folks. Great if you're going to double major, that's the thing. But I think the business analysts or the business experts, but then you have the behavioral analysts to really think about like what are the best ways to kind of like design this natural language interface with the model.
Maybe we'll jump into some rapid fire questions, like just a few of them, like just one overhyped AI use case you wish people would stop pitching.
There's so many of the coding agents, and I think,
Enough coding agents.
Yeah.
Okay. The most underrated skill for an AI product manager today.
I think evaluation, as we were talking about. Yeah.
Okay. If you were building a new AI startup today, what space would you go after?
Can I give two answers?
Yeah.
I think one I've been really interested in is kind of this, what is that 95% to 5%, the 100% autonomy?
Yeah.
Is there something that you could build in terms of insurance, right? Like
in the insurance vertical, you mean?
Not in the insurance vertical, but like how do you insure against that?
Okay. Got it.
Right? If you had a travel agent that went ahead and did some stuff, what are kind of backstops and so on.
Very interesting. You said two?
Yes, the other one, I don't yet know whether it's a startup or a big company thing, because I think there's multiple ways to look at it. But I do deeply think that this whole idea of memory is a very important one.
Got it. Remembering the context.
Remembering and reflecting and bringing it back to the user.
Got it. Okay, very cool. Last one. In 5 years, AI at work will feel more like dash than dash.
I think more meaningful than mundane. Like I would never want to wake up and think, oh great, I have 500 emails and like I want to mark 50 of them spam. I want AI to do it.
Okay, cool, awesome. Thank you so much for joining and sharing your journey and all the learnings. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Anand. It was fun.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank
Pleasure.
you.
Yeah.